as a tzaddik or as not a tzaddik. You can see him as a hero. You can see him as a victim. You can see him as a success, and you can see him as a failure. And Chazal and commentaries, both modern and old, see him in all of those ways. So today I'm going to give a portrait of Noach that following the text that I'm going to selectively choose is a portrait of Noach that I think is appropriate and maybe instructive to our times. So that's the goal which I intend to accomplish tonight. So I'm going to begin, if you can imagine you're watching a movie that starts with a scene that you don't understand, and then we're going to do a flashback, right? And come back to that point, and then there's going to be that aha moment where now I get it. And I'm going to begin by the moment at which the ark comes to a rest. After a year of rain and flooding, the ark comes to a rest. And I'm going to share with you 3 verses and 3 questions. So in chapter 8, verse 15 and 16, we read, Vayedaber Elokim el Noach lemor. So God spoke to Noach saying, say minateva, go out of the ark, you and your wife and your children and your daughters-in-laws, leave the ark. That's followed by Noach doesn't say a word. He offers some animals. He sacrifices some animals. God then speaks to him and tells him to be fruitful and multiply. Not once, but he tells him twice to be fruitful and multiply. And he tells him about about not bringing a flood again on the land. And he tells him that he brings the rainbow as a promise. And Noach doesn't say a word. Doesn't say a word. And then Noach, what does he do? He begins to plant the land. And the verse says, Vayachel Noach lintoa ish adama lintoa karim. Noach, the man of the earth, begins to plant a vineyard. And he becomes drunk and passes out. So 3 questions. First question is, why did God have to command Noah to leave the ark? He just spent a year encased and enclosed with all the creatures on earth, including his wife, his children, his daughters-in-law, every animal imaginable. And now he hits upon dry land. Wouldn't he have wanted to leave ASAP, get out of that ark? Why does God have to command him to leave the ark? Likewise, why does God have to command him to be fruitful and multiply? First of all, it would be self-evident that he needs to do that. But even more than that, the command was already given to man, to Adam Arishon, to Adam the first, right? He was told to be fruitful and multiply. That was a commandment for all mankind. Why did he need to be told again to be fruitful and multiply, not once, not twice? And it comes in the category of giving all of the Noahide laws to Noah. And again, Noah doesn't respond to any of this. And then finally, why is it that he plants a vineyard? Now, listen, vineyards are important, and having a drink at the end of the day may be something that is soothing and comforting and okay. But by Yochel, he began. Why is the first thing that he plants? How could the first thing that he plants? It's not wheat, it's not barley, it's a vineyard. So a colleague of mine, Rabbi Barry Gelman, wants to suggest the following. He says, how can a person go on and just pick up where he left off when he's full of grief and suffering? It's not so simple when you're grieving and you're suffering. And so it could be that Noach was paralyzed and he didn't know how to deal with that paralysis. Now, One answer to the question of why he said God had to command him, Tsei min hateva, is because it's parallel to the command that God told him, Bo el hateva, go into the ark, to begin the process, to begin the year in the ark. And so God said, go in. God said, come out. Some even suggest that his son said to him, Abba, it's time to leave the ark. And he said, no, 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 no. God told me when to go in. God will tell me when to go out. But the third suggestion is the one that I would like to pursue. What happened to Noah? What so devastated Noah, and how could it come to be? So I'd like to begin with going back to the beginning of the story. In the very architecture that Noach was commanded about the ark, he's given one thing that stands out in the few verses that talk about we're given the dimensions of the ark, and then we're told, Noah is told to tzohar ta'aseh leteva, make a tzohar in the teva. Now, of all of the architectural features that he needed, rooms and ventilation and where to store all the feces and everything else, it just says tzohar. And the question is, what is this tzohar? And the rabbis have two opinions what the tzohar is. One says it's an opaque stone. It was a stone that allowed light to come in. And others say that it was a window. What's the difference between an opaque stone or a window? You know, a piece of quartz, let's say, that was put in the walls of the ark versus a window? Well, the difference is very obvious. A stone that is opaque allows light to come in, but you can't do what? You can't see out. A window allows you to get the light coming in, but also allows you to see what's out there. So hold that thought for a moment. So now let's go back to that verse in which God told Noah to go into the ark. So now it's 120 years now. He's been working on the ark, and God now tells him, Vayom Hashem leNoach, bo, go, you and your household el hateva, go into the ark. Ki otcha ra'iti tzadik lifnai bedor hazeh, because I have found you righteous before me in this generation. Now, if you know the opening of the Parsha of Noach, there's something missing in God's statement. When he says, for I have found you righteous, tzadik lefanai bedor hazeh, he's leaving something out. We're introduced to Noach ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav. He wasn't just a tzaddik. He was a pure, wholehearted tzaddik in his day, in his time. But God only says tzaddik. He leaves something out. Why does he leave that out? And how does it play into the story? So Rabbi Soloveitchik suggests the following, based on the Gemara that says you only tell a person partial praise before them. In other words, when you're talking about somebody and you're praising somebody to somebody else, you can tell the full praise, everything about them. But to their face, you only tell part of the story. Why? So Rabbi Soloveitchik says for two reasons. He says one reason is it shouldn't go to their head. They shouldn't get an inflated ego thinking, oh yeah, I'm pretty hot stuff. Look at what God says about me. The other is as a motivator. As a motivator, if you say some of it, enough to say this is really a positive role model, that person will continue to do what? Will continue to strive to be a positive role model. So through Rabbi Soloveitchik's eyes, one can imagine that for some reason, God seems to find the need to cajole Noach, right? Come into the teva because you're a tzaddik. He doesn't say you're 100% tzaddik, you're all done. You're a tzaddik, go into the ark. I want to spare you and your family. However, he doesn't go right into the ark. He doesn't. And in fact, a few verses later, 6 verses later, we read, Vayavo Noach, and Noach went, right, or comes, he and his sons and his wife and his sons' daughters, Ito el Ateva, they go with him into the ark, Mipnei Mehamabu, because of the waters of the flood. In other words, they didn't enter the ark until the waters forced them to go in. They didn't go in because God said, come into the ark, go into the ark, right? Oel Ateva, come. Even though God is cajoling him, even though God is telling him positive things, Noach seems to freeze or wait and doesn't go into the ark until he has no choice. The waters are rising and he has no choice, either be drowned or go into the ark. Rashi says something astounding on this verse. Rashi says because of the floodwaters, he says, Af Noach mikatne emunah haya. He says, you know what we learned from this? Noah also was of those people of little faith. Can you imagine? Rashi is saying Noah lacked faith. He lacked emunah. And he says he believed and he did not believe. Notice he had emunah, ve'eno emunah, says Rashi. He believed, but he didn't believe. What does it mean he believed it? He did not. He believed and did not believe that the flood would come, and he would not enter the ark until the waters forced him to do so. No, it's maybe. And then when the flood waters came, okay, I get it. He goes into the ark. How do we understand that, Rashi? In light of the text, God himself calls Noach a tzaddik. How can you say he doesn't have faith? How can you say he doesn't have faith? How is that even possible to imagine? So enter Rav Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev in his commentary, the Kedushat HaLevi, and he says something very profound. He says as follows: Noach, far from being a boastful individual. Now, we know Noach wasn't boastful. In fact, Noach had a hard time even communicating with other people, right? He one of the reasons he's not considered as righteous as Abraham in his generation was because he didn't seem to go out of his way to get others. He didn't pray for others, it says, and he didn't get others to go into the ark with him, and he didn't succeed in getting them to repent. He didn't pray for them, says the commentaries. So Noach, I'm quoting now from the Kedushat HaLevi, says, Noach, far from being a boastful individual, proclaiming himself as a major deity, was the very opposite, a humble person, to whom it would not have occurred that a prayer of his would influence God to reverse a decree, which he had certainly not arrived at without first agonizing over it. In other words, who am I to contradict God? God must have thought this through. God must have decided this was necessary. So who am I? He goes further. How could Noach even think that way? He says it was because he did not consider himself to be especially righteous. The Hebrew is much more compelling than the English. Adarabba. Hayachashuv be'enav kashar hador v'hayachashuv im ani eya nitzol b'teva v'ani ein tzadik yoter mishar hador. You know what he wants to say? I'm no more righteous than everybody else. I'm not special. I'm not a tzaddik. And you know what? If God is going to save me because of whatever few deeds I've done, you know what? There are other people who will also be saved. He didn't think he was the only one. He didn't think he was the only one. He says as follows: If ani ein tzaddik yoter, me who is not a tzaddik any more than anybody else in my generation, gam keinatzel lachein lo haya mitpalel ador. You know what? They can also find a way to be saved, and I don't have to pray for them. I shouldn't pray for them. V'zeh sheperish Rashi. This is what Rashi meant when he said Af Noach mikatnei emunah. When he said he was of little faith, Rotzelomar, it means to say, Noach haya katan be'enav be'emunah shehut tzadik tamam. He was in his eyes, he was of little faith that his lack of faith was in himself. He didn't see himself as a tzaddik. Sheyachel levatel gezerah, that he could undo, that he could nullify a decree of God. Shelo haya chashuv be'enei atzmo klum. I'm sorry, because he thought nothing of himself in his own eyes. So now it begins to come together. Noach didn't think of himself as anything special. He thought God was telling him to do what he was telling everybody else to do. Save yourself, right? Follow my directions, and there's a way to be saved. And he thought other people would be saved as well. Now it begins, so what happens now? Follow with me. Now let's come back towards the end of the story. The ark comes to rest on Mount Ararat. Vayehi miketz arboim yom, 40 days after it comes to rest. Vayiftach Noach et chalon hateva asher asa. And Noah opens the window of the ark that he had made. So this must be, the Zohar must have been a window. The window, the chalon, it says chalon, the window that he had made. And then what happens? He still sees water. He sees water when he opens up the window. What does he do? You know the story. He sends the raven, and he sends him again, and he sends the dove, until finally what happens? It was in the 601st year of the month. What happens? Sorry. Charvu hamayim me'al haaretz, when the waters began to dry from the earth. Vayasar Noach echmesei hateva. Noach removes the covering of the ark, and he saw Vayar b'nei charvu pnei adama. He sees that the earth has been destroyed. Noach realizes he's the only one. He and his family. He sees the destruction. He sees the desolation. No one else has survived. No one else was intended to survive. It's all on him. He's suffering. He's grieving. You can almost get a picture of him looking out that window, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to move forward. So God has to say, Noah, get out of the ark. Same in Ateva. So he has enough faith in God, that he does. He leaves the ark and he offers some sacrifices to God. But that's it. He's still paralyzed. So God gives him the command, Pru'ervu, Noah, you have a mission. You have to repopulate the earth. Here are the Noahide laws. Here's my covenant. Here's my promise. No, it doesn't say anything. We get no response from Noach. There's not a word that comes out of Noach's mouth. Until Vayachel Noach ish adama, Noach has now in his eyes been devastated. He is a man of the earth. He doesn't know what to do. He's a piece of clay, a lump of earth. And what does he do? He plants a vineyard, makes grapes, makes wine, gets drunk. You know the rest of the story. Chum finds him naked, does whatever he does. And it isn't until his two sons, Shem and Yafet, are able to literally cover their father, comfort their father, give kindness to their father, that he suddenly realizes there's what to live for. And it's only then that Noach can begin to pick up the pieces. Only then that Noach is able to move forward. And there's two endpoints to this that I want to point out. I believe that on some level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, understood this Noah. Because when he said to him, Noah, go into the Teva, because I found you a tzaddik, you are a tzaddik before me, right? You have the potential to be a tzaddik. I'm encouraging you. I'm telling you what you can be and what you can continue to be. You have faith in me. But you know what you're lacking, Noach? You're lacking faith in yourself. The belief that you can handle this, the belief that you can move forward, belief that there's what to rebuild and recreate. And Noach didn't hear that at first. When he looked out that window and he saw the desolation and the devastation, the death and destruction, he couldn't process it. He couldn't process it. The best he could do was try to numb his brain with wine. But it was his sons, Sham and Yafet, who together picked up the blanket, turned themselves back, and did an ultimate, wonderful act of chesed, of kindness for their father, that he realized he has a mission. He has what to live for. He has what to do through them, for them. And it's only then that Noach is able to pick himself up and move forward. So I share this with you because I think in many ways, we all feel a little bit of that Noach. We look out the window. We're inside our own arks each and every day. We're so frustrated. We're so limited. And we have no control over it. We can't defeat the plague on our own, right? And we look at it and maybe we're just, what can I do? What can I say? I'm just gonna, numb myself with depression, with TV, with Netflix, with whatever it is. A little bit of liquor, I don't know, right? But two things. God is encouraging us. You're righteous before me. You're important. I care about you. You can do this. On the one side is the faith that God has in us, even as we have faith in him. And the other side is, I have whom and what to live for. I have whom and what that share with me this common bond of humanity, of the kindness that they do for me, and the responsibility I have back to them. It is those two things that hopefully will lift us up and propel us forward, hopefully soon, for some of us now, to leave our individual arcs, not just sit and look out the window and bemoan our situation and bemoan the fate of the world, but to pick ourselves up and do something constructive, reconstructive, even at this time. That's the message I wanted to share with you tonight. Before I let you go, on a much lighter note, this past Sunday was the establishment of the permanent monument, the unveiling for Aryeh Gorenstein, Olav Shalom. And Aryeh Gorenstein, amongst many things that he was, a doctor, a pediatrician, a dentist at one point, a photographer, a little bit of an author. He was also a jokester and a punster, and he wrote several books of Jewish riddles and puns. And I want to share with you one that I actually shared on Sunday at the unveiling. He asked the following riddle: where did Noah keep the bees? Where did Noah keep the bees? Anyone? In the archives. If you didn't get that one, come back next week. I'll have another one.
Funny.
I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, and please, if you're looking out the window, see all the positive and dispense with any of the negative. We need to do that. Thank you.
Beautifully spoken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
You.
Shabbat Shalom. And